Welcome back to Vintage Mike Tales, my dear friends. I want to take a moment to thank each and every one of you for joining me here today. Your support, your comments, and your presence mean more than words can say. This channel is more than just stories. It's a place where hearts connect, where emotions come alive, and where love finds its voice. So settle in, relax, and let me take you on another emotional journey. This is a story of healing, of second chances, and of a love that changes everything. Let's begin. The rain fell in thick, cold sheets, pounding the cracked sidewalks of Brooklyn as Regina Robinson gripped her son's small hand and hurried through the night. Her suitcase wheels rattled over uneven pavement, but she didn't dare slow down. 8-year-old Jordan shuffled beside her, his backpack bouncing against his back. He didn't ask questions. He didn't have to. He knew what the hurried escape meant. "Keep walking, baby," Regina whispered, her voice trembling, though she tried to sound calm. Jordan's big brown eyes turned up at her. "Are we safe, Mama?" Her throat tightened. Safe. It was a word she hadn't felt in years. "We will be," she said softly. "I promise you, Jordan. Tonight we're leaving it all behind." Behind them stood Marcus Robinson, her husband of 10 years, a man whose love had curdled into cruelty long ago. His voice still echoed in her ears from earlier that evening. Angry, cutting, belittling. He had been drinking again. And every bitter word, every slammed door, every sharp movement reminded her that if she stayed, her son would grow up thinking this was love. That thought terrified her more than the bruises, more than the loneliness. So she left. The cab she hailed screeched to the curb, headlights slicing through the rain. She shoved the suitcase into the trunk, then slid into the back seat with Jordan. Her hands shook as she gave the driver an address, an old friend's place who had offered her a couch, until she could get back on her feet. When the cab pulled away, she finally let herself exhale. Rain streaked the window, and New York's glowing skyline blurred through her tears. Jordan leaned against her, and she wrapped her arm around him tightly. "You're my brave boy," she murmured, pressing a kiss into his curls. "We're starting over." The weeks that followed were a blur of survival. Regina found a tiny one-bedroom apartment in Harlem, a space that smelled faintly of old paint and dust, but it was theirs. She picked up extra shifts at a downtown office through a temp agency, answering phones, filing papers, making copies. The pay wasn't much, but it kept food on the table and covered rent. She told herself it was enough. That love was behind her. That life now was about Jordan and keeping him safe. But at night, when she lay awake on the worn mattress, the silence pressed in. She would touch the faint scar on her arm where Marcus had grabbed her too hard one night, and shame would creep in. Not just for staying so long, but for believing that was all she deserved. One Monday morning, her life shifted without warning. The temp agency called with a placement, Wallace Enterprises, a global investment firm in Midtown Manhattan. She was to work as an executive assistant for the CEO temporarily. When she walked into the glass skyscraper, she felt small. The lobby soared with marble floors and chandeliers. People in sleek suits moved with purpose, their heels clicking in rhythm. She smoothed her thrift store blazer and held Jordan's picture tucked into her bag like a secret shield. Upstairs, she was led into a wide office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Behind a desk sat Greg Wallace. He looked up when she entered. A man in his mid-30s, tall with sandy brown hair neatly styled, a strong jawline softened by kind blue eyes. His tailored suit spoke of wealth, but the warmth in his gaze surprised her. "You must be Regina Robinson," he said, standing to shake her hand. His grip was firm but not overpowering. "Thank you for stepping in on such short notice." His voice carried authority, yet there was a gentleness beneath it that caught her off guard. Most men she'd met in power wielded it like a weapon. Greg's presence was different, steady, grounded. "I'm happy to help," Regina managed, forcing her nerves down. "What would you like me to start with?" He smiled faintly, as if amused by her eagerness. "Let's begin with the basics. And please call me Greg." The day passed in a whirlwind of emails, schedules and phone calls. Regina kept her head down, determined not to make mistakes. Still, she noticed things. The way Greg thanked every employee by name. How he paused during lunch to ask the receptionist about her sick mother. How he never once raised his voice. It unsettled her. Men with power weren't supposed to act like this. Late in the afternoon, as she organized files in the corner, Greg's voice broke through her thoughts. "Miss Robinson, how are you settling in?" She straightened, startled. "Fine, thank you." His eyes lingered, not with scrutiny but with curiosity. "I hope the workload isn't overwhelming." "This place can be a lot." She nodded quickly, not trusting herself to say more. His concern felt too close, too dangerous. When the clock struck 6, she grabbed her bag and slipped out, her heart pounding harder than it should. That evening, Jordan greeted her with a toothy grin as she walked into their apartment. He had drawn a picture of them, just the two of them standing under a bright sun. She hugged him tightly, fighting tears. "Mama," he whispered, "are we happy now?" She pressed her cheek to his. "We're getting there, baby, one day at a time." But later, as she tucked him in, Greg's kind blue eyes returned to her mind. She shook her head quickly, whispering to herself, "No, don't go there." Not again. The following week, her walls began to crack. On Wednesday, Marcus called. His voice slithered through the phone, sharp and familiar. "You think you can just leave me, Gina?" he hissed. "Don't forget I know where you live. And don't think some fancy job is going to save you. You'll always be mine." Her hands shook so violently she dropped the phone. She pressed it to her chest, gasping for air. She told no one. Not her friend, not even Jordan, and especially not Greg. This was her battle. But the strain showed. By Friday, exhaustion weighed heavy on her face. She slipped into the office stairwell during lunch, sliding down onto a step as tears finally broke free. The door creaked open and she froze. Greg stood there. For a moment he said nothing. He simply walked over, sat down beside her and rested his elbows on his knees. They sat in silence, the hum of the city faint through the concrete walls. When she finally wiped her eyes, embarrassed, he spoke softly. "You don't have to explain, just know. You don't have to fight alone." Her chest tightened. No one had ever said those words to her before. Not with such sincerity. She wanted to believe him. But believing meant trusting, and trusting meant opening the door to hurt again. So she forced a small smile, gathered her things and whispered, "Thank you, Mr. Wallace." But that night, as she lay awake with Jordan's soft snores beside her, his words echoed in her mind. "You don't have to fight alone." And for the first time in years, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, love wasn't gone forever. The hum of midtown traffic buzzed faintly through the tall windows of Wallace Enterprises. Regina sat at her desk outside Greg Wallace's office, her fingers flying over the keyboard. She tried to lose herself in scheduling meetings and answering emails, but her thoughts kept circling back to that moment in the stairwell, the warmth of his voice, the quiet way he sat beside her without judgment. "You don't have to fight alone." The words lingered like a balm she wasn't ready to accept. She shook her head and muttered under her breath, "Focus, Regina. You're here to work." Still, every time Greg stepped out of his office, her heartbeat tripped. Later that afternoon, Regina stood by the copier, watching the machine spit out reports. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, and the moment she saw the name on the screen, her stomach dropped. Marcus. She let it ring, but the vibration wouldn't stop. She stepped into the hallway, pressing the phone to her ear. "You still think you can ignore me?" His voice was venom wrapped in silk. "I know you've been working for some rich man. Don't forget, Gina, I made you, and I can ruin you." Her throat went dry. "Leave me alone, Marcus." His low chuckle made her skin crawl. "You're still mine. Don't forget it." The call ended, but her hands shook too hard to put the phone away. She leaned against the wall, forcing back tears. A shadow fell across her. "Regina!" She turned. Greg stood a few steps away, concern written across his face. She straightened quickly, pasting on a professional smile. I'm fine. Just a personal matter." He studied her, his eyes searching deeper than her words. "If you ever need to step away, or if you ever need someone to listen, my door is open. You don't have to explain." The gentleness nearly broke her. She nodded quickly, mumbling, "Thank you, Mr. Wallace," before hurrying back to her desk. But the truth was undeniable. His kindness was seeping through her cracks. That Friday evening, Greg stopped by her desk as she packed up. "Regina," he said casually, "there's a charity gala tomorrow night. It's a family-friendly event. Why don't you bring your son?" She blinked. "My son?" "Yes, Jordan, right?" His smile warmed. "We'll have activities for kids, games, even a magician. It might be fun. She hesitated. The idea of stepping into his world terrified her. What would people think? A wealthy tycoon and his assistant? And yet, Jordan's face flashed in her mind. He deserved a night of joy. Greg seemed to sense her hesitation. His voice softened. No pressure, but I'd like to meet him. I think he'd enjoy it. For a moment she forgot to breathe. No man had ever expressed interest in her child before. She whispered, "We'll be there." The next evening, Regina dressed Jordan in his best button-down shirt, though it was slightly too big. She slipped into a simple navy dress, one she'd bought years ago and barely worn. As she stood before the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. There was still pain in her eyes, yes, but also a flicker of hope. At the gala, glittering chandeliers hung over the ballroom, laughter and music filling the air. Regina felt out of place instantly, clutching Jordan's hand as people in designer gowns swept past. Then she saw Greg. He stood at the center of the room, tall and confident, yet the moment his eyes found hers, his entire expression softened. He walked over, ignoring the whispers that trailed behind him. "Regina," he said warmly, "you look—" He paused, his eyes lingering with unspoken admiration. "Beautiful." Heat rose to her cheeks. "Thank you. And this must be Jordan." Greg crouched down so he was eye-level with her son. "It's good to finally meet you. I've heard your mom talk about you." Jordan smiled shyly. "Really?" "Really," Greg said with a grin. "And tonight we've got a magician just for you." For the rest of the evening, Jordan laughed and clapped at the magic tricks, his eyes glowing in a way Regina hadn't seen in months. Greg stayed nearby, making sure they both felt included, introducing Regina as a remarkable woman who keeps me organized instead of just an assistant. At one point, as Jordan ran off to join other kids, Greg leaned close. His voice was low, tender. Seeing him smile like that, it's worth everything. Regina swallowed hard, her chest tightening. No man had ever looked at her child with such genuine affection. Later that night, as she tucked Jordan into bed, he whispered, "Mama, Mr. Greg's nice. Can he come again?" Her heart squeezed. She kissed his forehead. "We'll see, baby." But deep down, she already knew the answer. The weeks that followed blurred into a rhythm. Work, home, Marcus's occasional calls. And slowly, quietly, Greg's presence became a steady thread in her days. He would ask about Jordan's soccer practice. He'd bring Regina coffee exactly the way she liked it. 2 creams, no sugar. He praised her ideas in meetings, making her feel valued, not invisible. One rainy Tuesday, she was late picking up Jordan from school. Her train had stalled, and panic clawed at her as she rushed through the streets. When she arrived, breathless, she found Greg standing by the school gates, holding an umbrella over Jordan. "I was in the neighborhood," he explained with a small smile. "Figured I'd keep him company until you arrived." Tears burned her eyes. "You didn't have to. I wanted to." His voice was firm yet gentle. "You do so much on your own, Regina. Let me help where I can." Her heart ached. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to lean on him. But fear kept whispering, men don't stay. Men hurt. That night, after Jordan fell asleep, she sat at the kitchen table, staring at her reflection in the darkened window. "Don't fall, Regina," she whispered. "Don't let him in." But she knew deep down it was too late. Greg Wallace had already slipped past her walls. The breaking point came 2 weeks later. Marcus showed up outside her apartment. She froze when she saw him leaning against the building, his smile sharp and cruel. "Thought you could hide from me," he sneered. "Living in this dump, working for some rich boy? You think he cares about you? You think he'll keep you when he finds out how broken you are?" Her hands trembled as she pushed Jordan behind her. "Leave us alone, Marcus." He stepped closer, his voice low and threatening. "You'll always be mine, Gina. Don't forget it." Before she could respond, a black SUV pulled up. Greg stepped out, his expression thunderous. He crossed the sidewalk in long strides and positioned himself between Regina and Marcus. "Stay away from her," Greg said, his voice calm but firm. "She doesn't belong to you." Marcus laughed bitterly. "And you think she belongs to you? She's damaged goods, Wallace. She'll drag you down." Greg's jaw tightened, but his voice never wavered. "She doesn't belong to me either. She belongs to herself, and if you ever come near her or her son again, you'll regret it." Marcus's smirk faltered. He spat a curse before stalking off into the night. Regina's knees nearly buckled. Greg turned to her, his expression softening instantly. "Are you okay?" Tears welled in her eyes. "Why are you doing this for me?" He cupped her face gently, his thumb brushing away a tear. His voice cracked with emotion. "Because you deserve more than fear, Regina. You deserve to feel safe. You deserve to be loved." Her breath hitched. For the first time in years, she felt seen, truly seen. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to let herself fall, but her past still whispered in her ear. That night, as she lay awake listening to Jordan's steady breathing, Regina pressed a hand to her heart. Greg Wallace was breaking down every wall she had built, and the terrifying part wasn't that he might hurt her. It was that he might love her, and she wasn't sure she was ready to be loved. The city was quiet that night, a rare hush settling over Midtown as the last workers trickled out of Wallace Enterprises. Regina sat at her desk, finishing up reports while the office lights dimmed. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, her mind elsewhere on Greg, on the way he had stood between her and Marcus, on the way his words still lingered in her chest. You deserve to be loved. She wanted to dismiss it as kindness, but the truth was heavier, deeper. Every time he looked at her, she felt it. The door to his office opened and she startled slightly. Greg stepped out, jacket slung over one shoulder, his tie loosened. His sandy brown hair was tousled, his piercing blue eyes tired but warm. "You're still here?" he asked softly. She nodded quickly. "Just finishing up." He walked closer, leaning against the edge of her desk. "Regina, you work harder than anyone I know. Do you ever rest?" She let out a nervous laugh. "Single moms don't really get that luxury." His expression softened. "I know, but you deserve it." Their eyes locked and the silence stretched between them. Thick with unspoken words, finally Greg exhaled, his voice low and unsteady. "I can't keep pretending, Regina." Her heart thudded painfully. "Pretending what? That you're just my assistant?" His hand brushed the desk, his knuckles grazing hers. "You've become more than that. So much more. I care about you, about Jordan. You've both become the brightest part of my days." Tears stung her eyes. "Greg, I know you've been hurt. I know you're scared, but I need you to know this." His voice cracked. "I don't want to replace your strength, Regina. I want to stand beside you." Her breath trembled. She hadn't realized how much she needed to hear those words until now. She swallowed hard, blinking back tears. "I don't know if I can, if I'm ready." He leaned closer, his voice a whisper. "Then let me wait. Let me prove that I'm not going anywhere." For the first time in years, Regina allowed herself to smile through her tears. The following weekend, Greg invited her and Jordan to Central Park. The air was crisp, leaves crunching underfoot as they strolled down winding paths. Greg carried a small picnic basket, insisting on doing all the work. Jordan ran ahead, chasing pigeons, his laughter echoing across the grass. Regina sat on the blanket Greg spread out, watching her son's joy with a bittersweet ache. "He hasn't laughed like that in a long time," she murmured. Greg sat beside her, offering a sandwich. "Every child deserves to laugh like that. Every mother deserves to see it." She turned to him, her eyes glistening. "You make it sound so simple." "Because it is," he said gently. "Love isn't supposed to be complicated. Respect, kindness, affection, those are the foundations. Everything else grows from there." She looked down at her hands. "I thought love was supposed to hurt. That's what Marcus taught me." Greg's hand covered hers, warm and steady. "That wasn't love, Regina. That was control. Real love lifts you up. It heals." Her chest tightened. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to let herself feel. When Jordan finally plopped down on the blanket, giggling, he looked up at Greg and asked innocently, "Can you stay forever?" The words pierced her heart. She looked at Greg, terrified of what he'd say. But he only smiled softly, ruffling Jordan's hair. "If your mom will let me, I'd like nothing more." Regina's breath caught. That evening, after Jordan was asleep, Greg walked Regina to her apartment door. They stood in the hallway, the dim light casting shadows over their faces. "I had a wonderful time today," Greg said, his voice low. "Me too," she whispered. He hesitated, then stepped closer, his hand brushing her cheek. "Regina, may I?" Her heart raced. Fear and longing warred inside her, but in the end, she closed her eyes and whispered, Yes, his lips met hers in the softest kiss, gentle, patient, filled with unspoken promises. For the first time in years, she felt safe in someone's arms, safe and cherished. When they pulled back, tears slid down her cheeks. "I'm scared," she admitted. Greg pressed his forehead to hers. "So am I. But I'd rather be scared with you than safe without you." For a few weeks, life felt like light breaking through clouds. Greg was careful, never rushing her. He called Jordan to ask about school, dropped by with groceries, and always made Regina feel seen. Slowly, she began to trust, to laugh again, to imagine a future where love wasn't a weapon. But the shadows of her past weren't done with her. One Thursday afternoon, as she left the office, Marcus was waiting by the curb. His eyes burned with rage. "So it's true," he spat. "You've got Wallace wrapped around your finger. You think you can just play house with my son?" Her stomach churned. "Marcus, leave us alone." He grabbed her arm, his grip tight. "You're making a fool of yourself. And when this ends, when he tosses you aside, I'll be waiting. You'll crawl back. Let her go." Greg's voice cut through the night like steel. He strode forward, his face dark with controlled fury. Marcus released her arm reluctantly, sneering. "You think you can save her, Wallace? She'll never be good enough for your world. She's nothing but a broken woman with baggage." Regina flinched, but before she could speak, Greg stepped closer, his voice firm and unwavering. "Don't you dare call her that. She's the strongest, most extraordinary woman I've ever known. And if you can't see that, then you've already lost what mattered." Marcus's smirk faltered. He spat on the ground before storming off, leaving silence in his wake. Regina's knees buckled and Greg caught her. She buried her face in his chest, sobs shaking her. "I'm so tired," she whispered. "I'm so tired of being afraid." Greg held her tighter, his voice breaking. "Then let me carry some of that weight. You don't have to do this alone anymore." She looked up at him, tears streaming. "But what if he takes Jordan from me? What if I lose everything?" "You won't," Greg said firmly. "I'll fight with you. For you. For him. Whatever it takes." For the first time, she allowed herself to believe him. That night, as she tucked Jordan in, he hugged her tightly. "Mama, I like Mr. Greg. He makes you smile." She kissed his forehead, whispering, "He makes me believe again." And when she lay in bed later, staring at the ceiling, she realized something terrifying and beautiful. She was falling in love with Greg Wallace. And she didn't want to stop. The first snowfall of winter dusted New York in white, flakes swirling like whispers of hope. Regina watched from her apartment window, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. Jordan was in the living room, building a lopsided snowman from cotton balls and tape. His laughter filled the space, but Regina's heart was heavy. Marcus hadn't disappeared. He had been calling more frequently, his threats sharper. Last night he'd sent a text, "I'll see you in court." Custody isn't yours forever. The fear gnawed at her, a constant weight. What if Marcus was right? What if the court listened to his lies? What if she lost Jordan? A knock on the door startled her. She opened it to find Greg, snowflakes dusting his hair, his blue eyes filled with concern. "Regina," he said softly, stepping inside. "You sounded shaken on the phone. What happened?" She swallowed hard, tears welling. "He's trying to take Jordan. He says he'll prove I'm unfit, that being with you is proof I can't raise him on my own." Greg's jaw tightened, his expression hardening. "You are the best mother I've ever seen. Don't let his poison make you doubt that." She shook her head, her voice cracking. "I can't lose my son, Greg. He's all I have." Greg cupped her face, forcing her to meet his gaze. "You're not alone anymore. We'll fight this together. I promise." The sincerity in his voice, the steadiness of his touch, broke something inside her. For years she had stood alone against the storm. For the first time, she believed someone might actually stand beside her and not leave. The days that followed were a blur of lawyers, paperwork, and sleepless nights. Greg hired the best family attorney in the city, sparing no expense. Regina protested at first, insisting she didn't want to be a burden, but Greg silenced her gently. "You and Jordan are not a burden," he told her, his voice trembling with emotion. "You're my family." Those words lodged in her heart like an anchor, holding her steady. The custody hearing was held in a cold, sterile courtroom. Marcus stood across the room, his suit crisp, his smile smug. He spun lies with ease, painting himself as a devoted father, claiming Regina was unstable, Claiming her relationship with Greg was a reckless distraction. Regina's hands shook under the table, but when she glanced at Greg, his calm, unwavering presence grounded her. When it was her turn to speak, she rose slowly, her knees weak but her voice steady. For years I believed I wasn't enough, that I didn't deserve respect or kindness or love. Marcus made me believe that. But then I looked at my son, at Jordan, and I realized I couldn't let him grow up thinking this was love. That's why I left. That's why I fight every day. Not for myself, but for him. Because he deserves to know love that is gentle. He deserves to grow up unafraid. Her voice broke, but she pressed on. I am not perfect. I am a woman who has been hurt. But I'm also a mother who will never stop fighting for her child. And no matter what Marcus says, nothing will ever change that. The courtroom was silent when she sat down, tears streaming down her face. Greg reached for her hand under the table, squeezing it tightly. When the judge finally ruled in her favor, granting her full custody, relief crashed over her like a tidal wave. Tears blurred her vision as Jordan clutched her waist, whispering, "We did it, Mama." She looked at Greg, her voice breaking. "We did it." That night, Greg surprised her and Jordan with a rooftop dinner at one of his buildings. The city skyline glittered like 1,000 stars, the air crisp with winter's breath. A small table was set with candles, warm blankets draped over the chairs. Jordan devoured hot chocolate and fell asleep under a blanket on a lounge chair, leaving Regina and Greg alone beneath the twinkling lights. Regina stared at the skyline, her heart swelling with emotions she could no longer contain. "I never thought I'd see this day. For so long I lived in fear. I thought love was closed to me, but you've shown me something I didn't think existed." Greg stepped closer, his hand sliding into hers. "Regina, I didn't just fall in love with you. I fell in love with the way you protect your son, the way you fight even when you're scared, the way your heart is still capable of softness despite everything you've endured." Her eyes filled with tears. "Why me, Greg? You could have anyone. Why a broken woman with a past?" He shook his head, his voice thick with emotion. "You're not broken. You're the strongest person I know, and I don't want anyone. I want you, just you." Before she could respond, he dropped to one knee. Not with a ring, not yet, but with something deeper. "Regina Robinson," he said, his voice trembling, "I don't need to rush you. I don't need promises tomorrow. All I need is today, and the chance to love you for as long as you'll let me. I want to build a life where you never question if you're enough. Because you are my everything." Her tears fell freely now, her chest aching with joy and disbelief. She fell into his arms, her voice breaking. "I never thought love like this was for me. But you proved me wrong." Their kiss beneath the New York skyline was tender and fierce all at once, sealing the promise of a love born not from perfection, but from healing. Weeks later, life settled into a new rhythm. Regina still worked at Wallace Enterprises, but now her days were filled with more laughter than fear. Greg came by often, helping Jordan with homework, cooking dinner, filling their apartment with warmth. One evening, Regina watched from the doorway as Jordan dozed off on the couch, curled against Greg's chest. Greg's hand rested protectively on the boy's back, his eyes soft with affection. A lump rose in her throat. She realized that this picture of peace, of safety, of love, was everything she had dreamed of but never dared believe she could have. She whispered softly to herself, "For the first time in years, I believe in tomorrow." Greg glanced up at her, smiling. "What did you say?" She walked over, kneeling beside him, her hand resting on his. "I said love didn't just find me, it healed me." He kissed her forehead gently, his voice warm. "And it always will." As the snow continued to fall outside, Regina knew her story had changed forever. No longer the woman defined by pain, she was a woman loved, cherished, and finally free. And as Jordan slept between them, she felt whole again. The city lights shimmered below as Regina adjusted the lace veil resting gently on her curls. She caught her reflection in the mirror, her deep mahogany skin glowing, her almond eyes brimming with emotion, and for the first time in years, she barely recognized the woman staring back. Not because she was different, but because she was finally free. 1 year had passed since that rooftop night when Greg promised her a love built on respect and tenderness. And tonight, surrounded by friends, family, and the quiet blessing of the winter sky, he was keeping that promise once more. Jordan was the first to burst into the room, his little bow tie crooked, his smile wide. "Mama, you look like a queen," he exclaimed, his gap-toothed grin lighting up the space. Regina laughed through her tears, pulling him close. "And you, my king, are the most handsome boy in the world." The music began, soft and full of warmth, and Regina's heart raced as the doors opened. Every step down the aisle felt like a lifetime of pain falling away. Every insult, every bruise, every night of fear dissolving into something stronger. And waiting at the end of the aisle was Greg. He looked at her as though she was the only person in the world, his blue eyes glassy with unshed tears. When she reached him, his hand trembled slightly as he took hers, pressing it against his heart. "I promised you a year ago I would love you without conditions," Greg whispered, his voice shaking. "Today I promise to love you for every tomorrow we are given." Her voice quivered, but it was steady with truth. "Greg, you didn't just love me, you healed me. You showed me that love doesn't break, it builds. And for that I will spend the rest of my life loving you." As they sealed their vows with a kiss, Jordan clapped loudly, shouting, "Finally!" And the whole room erupted in laughter and applause. Later, as they danced beneath the soft glow of fairy lights, Regina rested her head against Greg's chest. The world seemed to fall away, leaving only the rhythm of his heartbeat and the quiet certainty that she had found home. Once she believed love was no longer for her, but now wrapped in Greg's arms. With Jordan laughing nearby, Regina knew love had not only found her, it had stayed. And this time it was forever. Love isn't always found in perfect places. Sometimes it's born out of brokenness, and it grows stronger because of it. Regina thought her story was over, but Greg showed her that love can heal, protect, and last forever. Their journey reminds us that no matter what we've been through, we are still worthy of being cherished. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more emotional love stories. And remember, true love will always find you when you least expect it.